Somewhere right now, a 9-month-old is being handed to a stranger for the 4th hour today. No crying, no fuss, just a small, quiet stillness. You call that a good baby. A psychoanalyst would call it something else. For decades, quiet has been mistaken for calm. It isn't. Quiet, in a baby left too often without its primary caregiver, could be a nervous system that has stopped bothering to ask for help. That distinction sits at the center of a growing warning from clinical researchers, and it starts with a number most parents have never heard. 85%. That's how much of your brain's right hemisphere develops in the first 3 years of life. Not language, not logic. The right hemisphere, the part that reads faces, regulates emotion, and decides whether the world is safe. It doesn't build itself in isolation. It builds itself in relationship, moment by moment, through thousands of tiny exchanges with one steady person who responds when you cry. Psychoanalyst Erica Commisser has spent over 30 years watching what happens when that steady presence is missing. Her concern isn't about love. Parents who use daycare love their children just as fiercely as anyone else. Her concern is about a hormone, cortisol, your body's stress hormone. In small doses, it's useful. It sharpens focus, prepares you for a challenge. In a developing infant, repeated separation from a primary attachment figure can elevate cortisol for hours at a time. And an infant's brain, still being built, treats that chemical signal as information. It concludes something about the world. I am often alone, and being alone is dangerous. Where does that information get stored? In a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Think of it as your brain's smoke detector. Its job is to notice threat and sound the alarm. In early childhood, under chronic low-grade stress, that smoke detector doesn't just react, it grows. It becomes more sensitive, more reactive, more prone to firing at things that aren't actually dangerous. A loud voice, a change in routine, a classroom of 25 other children all needing attention at once. Have you ever wondered why some children seem to fall apart over things that seem small? A dropped crayon, a change of seat, a missed nope. It rarely looks like fear. It usually looks like a meltdown or a fist or a body that won't sit still. That's the piece researchers keep circling back to. A brain that spent its earliest years in a heightened stress state doesn't calm down once the stress ends. It stays wired for vigilance. Commisser points to the sharp rise in ADHD diagnoses as one visible symptom of an invisible pattern. Children whose stress response systems were activated so often, so early, that hypervigilance became their resting state. Not a chemical imbalance from nowhere. A nervous system that learned, in its first year, to expect too little regulation from the world around it. There's a piece of this that makes it even less fair and even more urgent to understand. Not every child responds to the same amount of stress the same way. Some children carry what researchers call a sensitivity gene, a variation that makes their nervous system read the environment more intensely than average, for better and for worse. In a calm, responsive environment, these children often thrive beyond their peers, soaking up warmth and turning it into resilience. In a stressful one, the same sensitivity works against them, amplifying every hour of separation into a louder signal than a less sensitive child would register. Two babies, same daycare, same hours, different biology, writing two very different outcomes. Add to that what clinicians call adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, the now well-documented tally of stressors like early separation, parental conflict, financial instability, or a chaotic home. The more of these a child accumulates before age 6, the higher their measured risk for later ADHD symptoms, anxiety, and behavioral struggles. Daycare alone rarely tips a child over that edge. Daycare stacked on top of a stressed, isolated, exhausted parent, a shaky routine, and constant caregiver turnover often does. It's rarely one factor. It's usually a pile. This connects to something far older than modern parenting debates. In the 1950s, psychologist Harry Harlow separated infant rhesus monkeys from their mothers and gave them two artificial substitutes. One made of bare wire that dispensed milk, one made of soft cloth that dispensed nothing. Every single monkey chose comfort over food. They clung to the cloth mother for security and only visited the wire mother to feed, then scurried right back. Attachment, Harlow discovered, isn't a byproduct of survival needs being met. It is a survival need in its own right. Decades later, neuroscientist Michael Meaney ran a different experiment, this time with rat pups. He noticed something strange. Mother rats who licked and groomed their pups frequently in the first days of life produced offspring with a permanently different stress response, calmer, more resilient, less reactive to threat for the rest of their lives. The pups who received less licking and grooming grew into anxious, hyperreactive adults. Same genes, different environment. Meaney had found one of the first hard proofs that early caregiving doesn't just shape behavior. It switches genes on and off. The field now calls this epigenetics, and it means the story your child's biology tells for a lifetime is partly being written right now, in how consistently someone responds to their cries. So what does a stressed baby actually look like if it isn't crying? Sometimes it's the opposite of crying. A baby who stops signaling distress because signaling never brought relief learns, quietly and correctly, that signaling doesn't work. That's not calm. That's the beginning of what researchers call an avoidant attachment style, and it doesn't stay in the crib. It shows up later as the adult who can't ask for help, who pulls away right when a relationship gets close, who mistakes needing nobody for being strong. Other children respond differently, clingy, anxious, unable to be soothed even by the person who is present. That's an ambivalent pattern, built from inconsistency rather than absence. And when caregiving is frightening rather than simply inconsistent, children can develop a disorganized attachment, wanting comfort and fearing the source of it at the same time. 3 different roads, all of them paved in the first 3 years. All of them still walkable in different shoes 30 years later. Here's where it gets complicated, because this isn't really about daycare as an institution. It's about dosage and timing. A toddler at 2.5 handles hours of separation very differently than an infant at 4 months, because the brain structures responsible for tolerating separation simply haven't been built yet in a 4-month-old. Commisser's argument isn't that mothers must never leave a child's side. It's that the first year, and to a lesser extent the first 3 years, are a uniquely sensitive window, the walls of a house being poured in concrete, not painted. Painting can be redone. Concrete can't. Why does this fall so heavily on mothers specifically? Not because fathers matter less. Fathers play their own critical role, often through rougher, more stimulating, more playful interaction that teaches a child how to handle excitement and risk. But biologically, a mother's oxytocin, the hormone released through pregnancy, birth, and breastfeeding, primes her nervous system to co-regulate an infant's stress in a way that is, at least for that first year, difficult to fully substitute. That's not a moral judgment. It's a biological asymmetry that modern culture has been reluctant to say out loud. This is also, admittedly, contested ground. The large-scale niche study of early child care, which tracked more than 1,000 children for years, found that quality daycare wasn't uniformly harmful, and that the quality of care at home mattered just as much as the hours spent away from it. So which is true? Probably both. Quality, consistency, and a child's individual sensitivity all seem to matter as much as the raw number of hours logged in someone else's arms. The honest answer isn't daycare is always dangerous. It's that dosage, timing, and quality interact in ways the culture rarely has the patience to explain in a single headline. And modern culture has quietly stacked the deck against it. Extended families used to absorb this labor. A grandmother down the hall, an aunt 3 doors over. What researchers now call the family diaspora, the scattering of relatives across cities, states, even countries, has left many parents, especially single mothers, doing alone what used to be shared among 4 or 5 adults. Add careers that can't pause, rent that can't wait, and a culture that quietly prizes independence over interdependence, and you get a generation of infants spending more unsupervised by-kin hours than any generation in recorded history. None of this means the outcome is fixed. A child's stress response system, however it was shaped in year 1, is not a life sentence. Later relationships, A teacher who notices, a grandparent who steps in, a parent who becomes more available once circumstances change, can recalibrate that nervous system over time. The amygdala that grew oversized from early stress can shrink its reactivity with enough consistent, responsive care at almost any age. Repair is real. It's just slower than prevention, and it takes more deliberate effort than simply being present would have taken in the first place. So what actually protects a developing brain if full-time presence isn't possible for every family? Consistency matters more than constant proximity. 1 or 2 steady, responsive caregivers a child can predict beats a rotating cast of well-meaning strangers. Responsiveness in the moments you are present matters more than the total hour count. Showing up fully for the time you have outweighs distracted hours stretched longer. And buffering transitions matters. A slow, predictable goodbye and a warm, attentive reunion do more to regulate a child's stress than almost anything else a caregiver can control. Think about your own nervous system for a second. Do you flinch at raised voices more than people around you seem to? Do you find it hard to ask for comfort, even when you want it? Do certain small disruptions in your day feel disproportionately unbearable? These aren't personality flaws showing up at random. They're often the fingerprints of an amygdala that learned its settings before you could form a single memory of learning them. That's the strange, sobering truth underneath all of this. The most important architecture of your emotional life was built before you could speak by someone responding or not responding to sounds you can no longer remember making. Somewhere, a 9-month-old is being handed to a stranger for the 4th hour today. Whether that becomes a footnote in their life or the blueprint for it depends less on the hour itself